Hey everybody, it is Gordon Majak here, back with another episode of Timeless Pop, Rock, and Soul. And today we have an artist that more than lives up to the billing of pop, rock, and soul, because this is an artist that, in my estimation and to my ears, to my way of thinking, this is an artist that had such a cool and unique way of combining elements of pop and of rock and of soul into a really interesting and original and unique mix. And they did it with such a flair back there in my childhood for about a 5-year period from 1966 to 1971. This was an artist that I'll tell you was maybe a little bit underrated and not quite as talked about as they should have been, but an artist that put together in those 5 years there just an incredible catalog of cool and unique music. And I will explain a little bit about what I think makes this artist so unique. And I look at this record, and man, I had this 45. So I look at this single, and this is just a snapshot right out of my past. We're going back to 1971 for this one. This is just unforgettable to me. The summer of 1971. I remember this so crystal clear. I had this 45. It is Tommy James in his classic hit there from the summer of 71, a song called Draggin the Line. What a song. And let me tell you about Tommy James. Now, if you think back to that period of music there, that 5-year period, man, what an incredible time in the music scene, 1966 through 1971. Let's just capture that 5-year period. And there was just so much incredible music. I mean, you just think about all the great Beatles music during that time, the Motown, just all the legendary artists during that 5-year period that were making great music. And yet, despite just the fiercest competition in the pop, rock, and soul landscape musically, this is an artist that carved out such a cool niche for themselves. And let me give you an idea what Tommy James did over a 5-year period. He had 6, that's a half dozen top 5 hits during that time, starting in 1966 with a song called Hanky Panky. That went all the way to number 1. 1967, the next year, he follows it up with I Think We're Alone Now. There's a classic. That got all the way up to number 4. The following year, he follows it up again. Another classic, Mony Mony. My goodness, how many times has Mony Mony been covered? That's a top 3 pop record for Tommy James in 1968, and he is on a serious roll. Later in 1968, another just stone cold classic, and that is the great Crimson and Clover. That's a number 1 record. Tommy James is jamming in the 60s here. Early 1969, another classic, Sweet Cherry Wine. That's a number 7 pop record. The spring of 1969, it's my personal favorite, just a ridiculously great song, and that is the classic Crystal Blue Persuasion, one of the all-timers. That's a top 2 pop record. And finally, in 1971, the 6th of his top 5 songs in 5 years, and that is this one that we're going to be hearing, Draggin the Line, which got all the way up to number 4. Just an unbelievable run. Here's the cover of the single there, Tommy James, Draggin the Line, 1971. Here's the cool thing about Tommy James, and then we will jump right into this song, because this guy is so cool, and his music is so cool. And this song, man, I just loved this song back in the day, and I never, ever got tired of it. I look at that record, and it brings it all back for me in the summer of 1971. But here's the coolest thing about Tommy James musically. A couple things, actually. First of all, as I said at the top, this is an artist that meets the billing. He is got elements of pop in his music, there's elements of rock, and there's elements of soul. And it's the way he puts those together. And here's how I believe he puts them together. He puts those 3 musical elements together and adds to the mix a perspective musically of psychedelia. Okay? He adds a psychedelic element to each of those 3 musical elements. So his particular sense of soul that he incorporates into his music is coming from a psychedelic perspective. So it's not just a straight soul influence. He's got his personal twist on it, which is the psychedelic aspect of it. When he brings in elements of rock music into his songs, he does it from a psychedelic perspective. So it's got a little bit of a unique twist, which of course was so perfect for those times. And during the late 60s and early 70s, such a great time for psychedelic music in general. So he incorporated that, but he did it in such a cool way. And then, of course, finally, with the straight pop influence, Tommy James's stuff was always very well written and very melodic and very accessible. It's no wonder all of these songs were big hits because they're easy to listen to. They're structured so beautifully and they're so melodic. And he always wrote great lyrics on all these big hit songs, memorable lyrics. And so his songs are very accessible, and it's easy to see why they're so popular. But again, he comes at that pop music element, and he approaches it from the perspective of psychedelia. So what you get is this psychedelic sound, but that's still very accessible. And you add that together with the rock part of it, and the way he makes those guitars sound and the way his songs move along with the percussion and the guitars and everything. I mean, there's a great rock influence there, but there is such an unmistakable soul in Tommy James' music, and it's just such a great combination, the way he weaves those elements together. And of course, his vocals, here again, coming from that psychedelic perspective, combining the pop and the rock and the soul. His vocals are so perfectly suited for that musical approach, number one. And number two, they were so perfect for those times. I mean, his voice was a voice that could really be heard and really be powerful back in those times, because that was a sound that was that people were looking for and that people were accepting of. So his voice just fit right in, not only with his own material, with his great lyrics and his great music, but right in tune with the times. And a pretty impressive track record for Tommy James. And he was a guy that, as I said, in the midst of all of that other musical competition back then, man, this dude ran off quite a string and had carved out a pretty cool little niche for himself. And it's one that I have never forgotten, because so many of these songs are just such immortal classics. I mean, Crimson and Clover and Sweet Cherry Wine and Crystal Blue Persuasion. I mean, it just on and on. The great Tommy James, always loved his sound, and this one takes me all the way back to the summer of 1979. I remember it or not 79, I'm sorry, but 1971. I remember blasting this one on my mom's stereo all summer long, and never got tired of it, and it still sounds fantastic all these 51 years later. Unbelievable. It is Tommy James, Draggin' the Line. Check out this boy's soul, man. This guy's got some soul swinging in these grooves. Give me some rock, Tommy. If they swing that groove any harder, I swear to God, the turntable's going to fall apart. The needle's just going to come right off of that old 45 back there in 1971. And you get that psychedelic soul, man. Just Tommy James, and yet he can make it just sound so pop and so easy to listen to, so accessible. But what a damn groove from Tommy James. Come on.
Loving the free and be the spirit of hugging a tree when you get near it, and digging the snow and the rain and the bright sunshine. Dragging a line, dragging a line.
So I was just looking at these dates, and I would have been, 8 years old when Tommy James put up his first number one, Hanky Panky, back in 1966. And then, of course, I was 13 when this one, Draggin' the Line, came out. So basically, from the time I was 8 till I was 13, Tommy James was just churning out the classic records back there in the 60s. And I remember just feeling like, man, this guy was like one of the real staples that you could just count on for great songs. Every time you turn around, Tommy James had one of those cool pop, rock, and soul songs, right? That was just cranking on the radio and that you could just groove to, and had cool lyrics, and you just could memorize all of his titles and his lyrics and everything. And and yet he still seems somehow underrated. To put up a track record like that, 6 top 5 songs in just 5 years, and so many of them are just iconic, not just hit records. These are iconic singles back there in the day by the great Tommy James. I love that lazy, swinging, soulful groove, which is in so many of his songs. And of course, we will definitely be coming back to a couple of these that I just named there, because some of these are just my favorites, not just from my childhood, from my whole life. What a cool niche Tommy James carved out for himself there for a while. If you haven't read his book, I can't remember the name of it, but I have read his book, and that was a pretty good read as well, talking about his time in the music business and dealing with all the con men and the mobsters and everything else. But a cool musical perspective and a cool personal perspective as well from the great Tommy James. Draggin' the Line back in 71, man. What a summer that was, cranking on the stereo there in the family room in the sunshine. You better believe that, man. That 45 got played to death. And so are some of these other songs in the meantime on my iPod. See you in the next one, folks. Hope you dug some Tommy James, Draggin' the Line. See ya. How can you not love that stuff?